live stream Canada Day edition. We'll say, even though it's July the 2nd, I hope everybody had a wonderful time with their families during the national holiday. Still is a national holiday. Will it be a national holiday much longer? This is one of the things we're going to be talking about on our program. And I'm very, very honored and pleased to have two people who know a lot about this topic. That topic being Canada and Alberta and what's happening today, what our country and what the province of Alberta are facing jointly, and what's the way forward. What are the complaints that Albertans have about our confederation? What is the state of things in Canada today? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it ugly? Is it all of the above? And what's good? What's bad? Can we fix it? This is sort of we hear lots of people saying, even our top politicians, Canada is broken. Well, what's broken about it? Can it be fixed, or is it beyond repair, and it needs a total overhaul? It needs a renovation, a different future, a different present. So I've got Bruce Pardy here. He is one of Canada's top legal scholars. He's a law professor who's taken some time off from that vocation, thankfully, to head up something called Rights Probe. And but he writes extensively on Canadian law, and most importantly, he spends a lot of time talking about people's misconceptions about what the law is, as opposed to what it's supposed to be, what people think it's supposed to be. And interestingly, although he's not an Albertan, he has written some of the best stuff out there that I have seen about the concept of Alberta independence. He's even fashioned a declaration of independence for Alberta, which is really a great piece of work. If you have not seen it yet, you can find that on his X page and also at his website, which is called Rights Pro. Welcome to the program, Bruce. It's great to see you again.
Thank you, Leighton. Always nice to be with you. Cheers.
We also have here, by the way, he's joining us from cottage country, which I was saying to him before we came on, is sort of as an Albertan, I have sort of a fanciful view, sort of a Shangri-La of cottage country. But he says it's more rustic than you'd expect. And also, it's my great pleasure to have my friend on the program. Really, the leading figure in the Alberta independence movement right now, Mitch Sylvester. He's the CEO of the Alberta Prosperity Project. He's worn many hats over the last few years, emerging kind of out of the COVID-19 situation, as Bruce did, really. But Mitch is traveling around Alberta. He's going to be in Airdrie tomorrow night if you want to catch him. But he's filling rooms throughout the province with Dr. Dennis Modry, who's going to be joining us later as well, and people like Jeff Rath, who's a lawyer and colleague of mine. And they're talking to Albertans about Alberta independence, not separation from Canada, but Alberta independence and why and what that would mean, what that's all about. Great to see you, Mitch. I'm really glad to have you on the program here on this discussion to talk about really what Alberta Prosperity Project is all about and what it means for Albertans.
Well, thank you, Leighton. It's good to be back.
So while we wait for Dennis to join us and people
Oh,
joining, oh, here's Dennis.
yeah, speaking of which,
So here we have Dr. Dennis Modry. Those of you who follow this program will know Dennis has been on a couple of times. He is really one of Alberta's all-time most esteemed physician or physicians. He's done groundbreaking work as a surgeon, but in his so-called retirement, he has been very much a political advocate and a cultural advocate. And as I was just saying before you joined us, Dennis, you and Mitch are traveling all around the province during doing your work on behalf of the Alberta Prosperity Project, which is really a public education program, as I understand it, educating Albertans and motivating Albertans to get involved and to learn more about Alberta independence and why it's necessary. Great to see you again, Dennis. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Leighton. Good to be here.
So, Bruce, I
Nice to
wanted
meet you,
to.
Bruce.
Yes. Oh, by the way, yes, it's great to bring. I know Bruce was mentioning he did an event last week with Mitch, but it's the first time they've been together virtually in sort of a round table like this. So I'm excited to bring the two of you together, actually, the three of you together here. So I wanted to start here, maybe with Bruce. Bruce, I know that Rights Probe started really kind of grew out of COVID-19. And I posted something out last week that I didn't think would turn out to be prescient, but it did. It was kind of a lament that, you know, Dr. Jordan Peterson is perhaps surpassed Wayne Gretzky as the most famous Canadian. And yet he is a persona non grata in his own country. There are no orders of Canada. There are no governors general medals, no accolades, nothing like that in his own country. And I thought, well, how strange this is, you know, when we're honoring people like David Suzuki and Ron MacLean. And then right on cue, right on cue, the Carney government comes out with what appears to be kind of a COVID-19 scrubbing with Bonnie Henry and Theresa Tam, two real, I would describe them as COVID villains, who are responsible for, directly responsible for many of the complaints and really rights violations that happened during COVID-19. And here they are being honored with high honor with the Order of Canada, no less. Is this a significant thing? Is this sort of a sign to us of what we can expect from the Carney government? What's your take on this? Whether this is significant, or do you think I'm exaggerating it?
No, you're not exaggerating it, Leighton, as a sign or a symbol. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can.
Okay. It is a sign or a symbol. It's not significant in and of itself, but it is a reflection of what Canada has become. You know, this is not the Canada that you thought you lived in, right, Leighton? Like if you took the measure of things like 7 years ago,
Yeah.
I don't know what we all would have said about the country that we thought of as home. But the one thing that COVID did for a lot of people, including you and me, I think, is that it revealed that the Canada we thought we lived in does not actually exist. And it's a different place.
Yeah.
And whether or not it's just different now, or whether or not it's always been a little different than we imagined, is academic now. It's a different place than the home that we thought we knew and that we loved. And
Yeah.
that country has characteristics that are painful to acknowledge.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people who are interested in Alberta independence sometimes think that the problem from Alberta is a whole lot of bad federal policies. And they're right. I mean, there are a whole lot of bad federal policies that punish Alberta in various ways. But the problem is not that simple. It's much deeper. It's much more profound. It's not just policy. It's not just bad policy. It's something that's found inside, if I might say so, the Canadian character. It's embedded in the Constitution. It's the way we think government's supposed to work. It's the way Confederation is organized. I've suggested that Canada is actually set up as a series of grifts. My Energy Probe colleague, Lawrence Solomon, has suggested that various regions and provinces have joined Confederation at the beginning, not to join, you know, a free country for its vision of a noble nation, but to receive the subsidies and grants from the federal government. You know, if you like, Canada is a series of bribes. And that is not the way most people think of their country. But if we're going to get past this, we have to see it as it really is. And what it really is not as pretty as the Canada that we would like to imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, when I was sort of doing some research for this, I pulled up a famous John Diefenbaker quotation,
Right,
which you know of, that says, "I am a Canadian, free to speak without fear, free to worship in my own way, free to stand for what I think right, free to oppose what I believe wrong, or free to choose those who shall govern my country. This heritage of freedom I pledge to uphold for myself and all mankind." And what you're saying, Bruce, is really interesting, because you're saying, well, that's the way we think of Canada. That's the Canada we think we all grew up in, but maybe that's not the country that we actually have. Is that a fair way to put it?
100% right. That's the Canada I wished I lived in.
Yeah,
The
me
Canada
too.
we actually have is managed.
Yeah.
You know, we have a managerial state. We have a managerial society. We are directed and controlled and supervised and influenced by our governments, and not just the federal government, but by all our governments at every level. Uh, it has turned into a technocratic organization that doesn't, I mean, only resembles in its very surface kind of ways the world that Diefenbaker was describing there in the quote.
Yeah.
And the aspiration that I have heard from Albertans mirrors that statement that you quoted from Diefenbaker. That's
Right.
the kind of land
Yeah.
they want to live in. That's the kind of province they want
Yeah.
to live in. It's the kind of country they want to live in. But that is not the Canada they live in right now.
Yeah. I had some involvement with the Alberta Prosperity Project, as these gentlemen know, and that's precisely the vision. In fact, the way I saw things, Mitch, turning to you in terms of Alberta Prosperity Project is what we were fighting to save, what we were fighting to conserve, I guess is a better way of putting it, is this vision of Canada that's sort of described in John Diefenbaker's quotation, is also set out in the Alberta Prosperity Project vision, which is essentially this. It says, our vision is for Alberta to become a new sovereign constitutional republic that recognizes the supremacy of God as a foundational to an Alberta constitution, civil society, the rule of law, which absolutely protects Alberta's individual rights and freedoms herein. That's the platform, at least what it used to be. But Mitch, maybe you could take us through. I know that you and Dennis have been traveling around all over Alberta, talking to people. What is the essential vision of Alberta Prosperity Project, and why have we reached a stage where you and others are saying that Canada is broken, it can't be fixed, and Alberta independence is the only option?
Well, that's kind of a recent come to Jesus moment for me in the last 6-8 weeks, maybe 10 weeks after the election, after the federal election, when we realized that we'll probably never see another Conservative government in Canada again,
Yeah.
based on what happened. I mean, if I can't understand how the situation could have been any better for us to actually elect a Conservative government than what happened here in the
Right.
last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So things, I'm a business person. Some of the things that I see when I grew up here in Bonnyville or in Alberta, I saw a place when we left high school. Actually, I was talking to a lady today who I was getting my oil changed, and she says, telling me that at 21 years old, her and her husband bought a house. And she said, could you imagine that? Well, I said, it was very easy for me to imagine that because we did basically the same thing. It was not uncommon for young people at 21, 22 years old to become a couple and to be able to afford to start their lives right away by buying a house and starting out that way and actually starting a family.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing, after the last 10 years, we're sure that the Confederation is working exactly the way they designed it, first of all. That's been a revelation to me.
Sort of tying into what Bruce has been saying. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing I see is that what we've got is a ruling elite of people in the East right now, defined by the Trudeaus and the Carneys, and the Freelands and all those people. And people are saying, well, you want to get away from Canada? Well, we definitely want to get away from those people. Absolutely. They're according to our Premier, they're sabotaging Alberta industry, and that's her words. And I'm seeing the same thing. I'm right in the middle of oil country here. We produce 35% of Alberta's oil here. So every single thing that the federal government rains down on Alberta rains down right on our heads here.
Yeah.
So we totally understand, when there's a hiccup in the oil patch or when there's a hiccup even in agriculture. So what we've got going on, is the fact that, they turned down Greece, they turned down Japan, they turned down Germany for their natural gas. At that moment, you knew that something was really, really wrong. Those are pretty good customers. Those would be very good customers that I'd want to have as a business for sure, saying that it wasn't in their plan. So at that point, you realize that Alberta's oil economy and all of that is not actually in the plan of the government of Canada because they're basically telling us that. And, they're putting caps on productions, which could cost us 54,000 jobs. Absolutely doing that right now in down east in Parliament. They're actually putting that stuff in, making electric cars mandatory by 2035.
And new restrictions on pipeline construction as well.
Pipeline construction. Electric cars are not feasible in Alberta. They don't work here. It's just too cold. And that's all there is to it. And there's not enough power. Can you imagine changing all the gas stations to electrical stations so that the infrastructure is not here for that to happen? But here's the thing. We overcontribute. We earn a lot of money here. We're the richest province in Canada, and we're not happy. And the reason we're not happy is because we could actually do better, and so could the rest of Canada. But what they'd have to do is, right now, we've paying Quebec $14 billion a year in transfer payments. to keep them in confederation, apparently, because Quebec's not a have-not province. So we understand what's going on there. That's basically $14 billion leaving Alberta's economy. And you know what? The truth of the matter is that we pay more in EI, $1.5 billion. We pay more in Canada Pension by $3 to $4 billion a year. We overcontribute in every program that we have, but yet we have a hard time getting anything accomplished here as far as pipelines and expanding our industry. So that's where the complaint is. The complaint is right there, and I think that people here are finally starting to understand that the federal government is not our friend, and they're consciously attacking Alberta, and that, you know what, it's time for a change. And unless they want to change all the rules over there in the east to accommodate Alberta, which I'm sure they won't do, I don't think there's any other path forward. We have to get away from those people. That's all there is to it.
And I understand, Mitch, that there is people, perhaps many people don't understand this. There's a process to force a referendum. It requires a certain number of signatures, and that actually you've been able to get that number of signatures, and that that has been delivered to Elections Alberta. Is that correct, or is that forthcoming?
Well, that's going to be on Friday. Actually, we're going to deliver that.
4th of July.
Yeah, the 4th of July. There's no significance there. Don't page anything into that. What I'm saying is that we actually have gathered 250,000 pledges from people. So the Premier changed the Citizens Initiative Act so we could actually call a plebiscite or a vote on any item. Our vote is very clear. Should Alberta remain a province of Canada, yes or no, and cease, or become an independent country. However, there's been competing motions put in. So they've accepted, Elections Alberta has accepted a motion from Thomas Lukaszuk, basically, which says nothing. It says the status quo. Should Alberta leave Canada, basically, is what they're asking us. So there's no clear question there. So we're going to challenge that, I believe. But we're moving
Sounds like
forward
something like Mr. Lukaszuk would come up with.
Yeah, well, Dennis would probably want to really get into that. Actually, that's a question for Dennis. Dennis would probably enjoy that. But the whole thing is that, there's a process, and yes, we're ready to do it. And if, according to the new rules, we need 177,000 verified signatures to make that happen, and we have the infrastructure, we have the volunteers, we have everything to make that happen. So if the government accepts that motion, there will be a plebiscite, there will be a referendum for independence in Alberta.
Remarkable. Dennis, I know that when you and I used to travel around a few years ago with Alberta Prosperity Project, at that time, and maybe this is wrong, correct me if this is wrong, but you were not quite convinced 3 years ago that there was no future for Canada. You thought that, you used to talk about a concept of leverage, that perhaps if Alberta made some motions in favor of independence, that might move the needle and create a conversation with Ottawa. But from listening to you recently in Bonnyville, it seems that your position on that has changed, and that you no longer think that leverage is really the answer. Do you want to explain why that is the case, and have I accurately described where you're at right now in your thinking?
Yeah, sure. I want to make two comments first before I address that particular subject. First is that, just getting back to the conversation about what's going on in Canada and what's going on, which hasn't been discussed internationally. I mean, there are people around the world that are longing for freedom and prosperity as well. They're feeling subjugated, dominated, and exploited, and their self-determination inhibited as well by the authorities in charge. And so what we're experiencing in Canada is no different. It's just that in Alberta, I think we have an opportunity to do something that perhaps many other jurisdictions can't do. And I think if we are able to achieve sovereignty for Alberta, I think it's a segue for, or at least it's an example for other regions in the world to follow suit. And I'm happy to discuss the Thomas Lukaszuk
Feel
issue
free.
well, but
If you'd rather talk about that than my question, go ahead, go for it.
well, we can talk. The reality of you're correct. You're absolutely correct. And Bruce, you wouldn't know this. Mitch knows this, and Leighton knows this. But in 2003, I had an idea, and the idea was how we could solve the problems of or the dysfunctional relationship between the West and the East, but particularly between Alberta and Ottawa. And it was based on a question that I posed to Ralph privately, and Ralph was a good friend of mine, and I had a lot of respect for him, and it was mutual. But so I said to him at the annual general meeting in Red Deer in 2003, I said, Ralph, I think I have a solution to solve this dysfunctional relationship. And he said, you do? And I said, yeah, would you like to hear about it? And he said, yeah. And so it was based on the question, Bruce, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but it was the question that I actually posed to Ralph at that time. And it was, Ralph, if you were the president or the prime minister of the sovereign country of Alberta, and Canada came to you and said, we would like Alberta to join Confederation under the current terms and cost of membership, would you? And I'll always remember his comment, his smile when he said to ask the question is to know the answer. Absolutely not. Mm-hmm. And so it's from that question that I drafted a document, and this gets to your point, Leighton. It was entitled Alberta at the Crossroads, Status Quo, Refederation, Autonomy. And I ran that through prominent other individuals, professionals, non-professionals, MLAs such as Ted Morton, MPs such as Don Mazankowski, and but it was all based on leverage. And the only leverage that I could envision at that time was the leverage of a referendum on sovereignty, which had the potential to open and change the Constitution. Now, the answer to your question, Leighton, is why did my thinking change on this? It changed for the following reasons, because I became more aware of really what the Clarity Act defined. And I recognized that within the Clarity Act, that in that fourth paragraph of the preamble, the last line where it says, well, the whole paragraph basically says, you know, a successful referendum obligates the provinces and the provincial government to negotiate with the aggrieved province, in this case it would be Alberta, and negotiations might lead to secession. And my interpretation at that time was might lead to secession also meant might not lead to secession.
Right.
But what's the interpretation of might not lead to secession? At that time, you know, thinking altruistically, it meant in my mind that negotiations could lead to Alberta getting what it wants within Confederation. Mm-hmm. But as I've seen over time, I don't believe that the East will ever give up its sovereignty or control. So the other interpretation of might not lead to secession means that negotiations fail and we're at a stalemate and we cannot move forward as a result. Negotiations have failed, we're stuck in this situation. So what can we do? Well, the only thing is then, as Bruce will know, is you look at sections 154 and 155 in that Supreme Court analysis of the Quebec secession reference, and there it speaks about the right of a region to consider secession if they feel as though they've been subjugated, dominated, exploited, or their self-determination compromised. And then you look at 155, and according to international law, it appears as though that there's even the possibility of unilaterally declaring sovereignty.
Right, as Kosovo did, for example.
Which has some international legitimacy to it, political legitimacy, if not legal legitimacy, when other countries acknowledge it. And so carrying forward, that changed my mind to an extent about trying to negotiate a better deal within Confederation. And then I said, I intellectualized what's happening on the ground. is this provincial government in Alberta actually willing to, on a referendum on sovereignty, are they actually willing to declare the sovereignty, or do they want to go down the rabbit hole of negotiation and then get to a point where negotiations fail? Or do they get to a point where Danielle Smith says, well, we got 2 of some 50 demands, not the 9 demands that she has asked for, but the other 40 or 50 demands that the public ostensibly would like to see happen.
Right.
And I came to the conclusion that Danielle might accept as a win 2 or 3 of her demands, but that doesn't solve many of the other problems.
Right.
And so we agreed as a group with Mitch and Jeff and I and others on the team that we would remove the sovereignty within or without Canada as a proper stepping stone to what the truth is, that Alberta's sovereignty can only occur without Canada. So then I was dealing with a request by Nigel Hannaford, the editor of the Western Standard, who asked me if I would comment on Maxime Bernier's perspective on a successful referendum as a negotiating tool, as leverage to get what we want.
Right. Your earlier position.
And I came to the conclusion that he's partially right, but not in the way that he thinks. And if you read the article that I wrote, it concludes that if Alberta has a successful referendum, declares its sovereignty, that is recognized internationally, particularly by the US, then she is in a position, because we've just declared our sovereignty, to now negotiate the terms of secession.
Right.
And those terms could include, in fact, Alberta getting everything that it wants. I just don't think, I'm at a point right now where I'm not confident that she would be the right person to negotiate the outcome of a successful referendum.
Right.
And if we were to do the honorable thing like David Cameron did following Brexit and resign and have somebody take her place who actually would negotiate the terms of secession, not the terms of coming back, but the terms of secession, then that's basically the long-winded answer to how I changed my changed my mind and convinced others to do the same thing.
Her recently announced panel of experts makes it pretty clear where she's going to take us. Again, the tyranny of experts that's been so familiar since COVID, where she's got people like retired Alberta Court of Appeal Justice Bruce McDonald, who last time I checked was no great libertarian on here. They're going to travel around and talk to people and sort of almost as a response to what you and Mitch are doing. But since we have a constitutional scholar in the room, Bruce, I'd like to pick up on what Dennis was just saying. You wrote a really a piece that drew a lot of attention. I want to say it was about 2.5 months ago, where you actually set out a Declaration of Independence for Alberta. I'm interested to know, in your view, does the Clarity Act and that Supreme Court of Canada reference that Dennis mentioned, does it actually set out a realistic roadmap for Alberta to secede from Canada, in your view?
The Supreme Court decision sets out only a very small number of steps. You hold a referendum on a clear question, and a clear majority of the people support it. And there's not much more to it than that. And that gives the province the mandate to negotiate. Doesn't give you unilateral power to leave, but the federal government and the rest of the country do not have unilateral power to make you stay. That's all really there is. And it's not much to go on. It's more than exists in most countries. Most countries don't have any kind of indication about how a portion of the country is supposed to leave. So it's more than we should expect, but it's not very much. And so my warning would be this: that not to put too much weight on the legalities of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have a Clarity Act, but the Clarity Act, in my opinion, should be viewed as the federal interpretation of the Supreme Court decision. It's sort of the opening position, if you like, of the federal government should these kinds of things come to pass. So we shouldn't ignore it. It's important, but it's also not the last word in the law. It's the federal version of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we should be under any illusion that what Alberta is considering here is nothing less than a political revolution.
Right.
I
The
don't
dirty
think-
word.
The dirty word. This is not a situation where, okay, we have a list of requirements, and if Alberta ticks off the requirements, then okay, you've done the job. Away you go. All right.
Yeah.
It's not gonna happen that way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's international law on this too, but international law is the language of international relations. We shouldn't put too much weight on that either. It's again,
Mhm.
it's relevant, but it's not determinative.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and in addition, all of these things, both the Supreme Court decision of 1998 and the Clarity Act, those were all prepared with Quebec in mind.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And everybody knows that Quebec is the favorite child of Confederation. Don't put it past the powers that be in the federal government, or who knows, it might, maybe even the court. If it's Alberta that's in question, maybe they'll change the goalposts. Maybe they'll
Yeah.
change the rules, right?
Yeah.
So the point is that at a certain point, this is going to become political and not legal.
Right.
And you have to accept that you're in a political arena, and there is a very high degree of uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to embrace the uncertainty as part of the territory, and that you are embarking on a project that your opponents will vociferously oppose with all their might, because without Alberta, the project of Confederation is put in doubt, because to a large extent Alberta is funding the program. Okay, so if Alberta leaves, the whole thing is now in question. So they're not going to just take it like, oh, we want to leave. Okay, so goodbye. That's not going to
Right.
happen that way.
Right.
Yes, we should be aware of all of the relevant law on this topic, and there's not very much. And after that, we need to proceed on the basis that this is a political enterprise, and the negotiation is essentially political and not legal, and that what you need to succeed more than anything else is the stubborn determination expressed by the people of the province that they will not put up with anything else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Bruce, that begs another question. Now, I know obviously you're a constitutional scholar. I know you're very familiar with the history in the United States as well. And a lot of times when we read about what happened back with the founding fathers in the United States, or even the Canadian founding fathers and, the Charlottetown Accords and so on, we read a lot about things at the ideological level, but at the time, I suspect, I don't know if you agree with this, I suspect that the situation was much more the way you're describing it right now. It was more of a political situation, a political movement. And I agree with you that we've got to get away from talking about in terms of ideology and talking about that stuff, and just get down to the grassroots of what is it that the people want. Do they want to live? Do they want to continue to live in a country that is something like Canada, the real Canada, not the one that Diefenbaker described? Or do they want a different type of society, a different type of country to live in? Would you agree with that? That we've got to focus on, getting away from talking about things on an ideological level and just get practical about, how are we going to do this?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think so, because the real hurdle is to, have this referendum and win it on a
Right.
clear question,
Yeah.
which has to be a very, very simple question.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, I mean, philosophy is also ideological. And
Right.
so there is, in fact, an ideological reason for all of this, in a sense. If Albertans want to live in a free country, and that's what they keep saying, and thank God for that, then the question is, okay, great. Now, can we sort of come together on what that means? Like, what do you
Right.
mean by a free country? Do you just mean free from Ottawa, or do you mean free? Because
Right.
those two things are very different.
Right.
And I keep suggesting to people that it's important to get free from Canada, from the Canada that is outside Alberta, but also free from the Canada that is inside Alberta. And there's a lot of Canada inside Alberta. I mean, for example, Alberta has a Westminster system of government too. Alberta has a managerial state. Alberta has socialized healthcare. Alberta has, like Canada, has the idea that there are different rules for different groups of people. I mean, this and many, many more things is the evidence of Canada inside Alberta. To be free of Canada, you must get rid of the Canada inside Alberta as well as the Canada outside Alberta. And that may be the most difficult job of all.
Yeah, that's a great point. In fact, it's if you might recall, Mitch and Dennis, I asked this question in Bonnyville, kind of in a nutshell what Bruce was just saying. Okay, so let's say everything turns out the way you wanted to, and you get your new Alberta. It's separate from Canada. How are you going to prevent the type of corruption, the type of cronyism, the type of grifting, to use Bruce's word or his colleague's word, that's going on in Canada, which is really ruining Canada, which is really what we want to get away from, what we want to be free of? How are we going to prevent that from happening in a new Alberta? How are we going to achieve that, Mitch? What's the plan there?
Well, it would be nice if you could hold them, according to the rules of law. First of all, even the laws that are here, if they steal from you, you should be able to put them in jail. If they, if they do anything illegal, they should be held accountable. We haven't had,
Right.
I don't think we put a politician in jail here since 1922. So honestly, I think it's become
Except maybe Colin
corruption
Thatcher.
has become an accepted way for governments to behave. So
Right.
so that would be a good start. But truthfully, I'm a proponent of something that they have in Switzerland. I know this is not a surprise to hear for Dennis, but I like direct democracy. I would like to have no parties. I would like to have the people vote on every motion that or every
Is that part of
policy or
APP's
all of that.
policy, the
I
lack
really
of
like the
political
fact-
parties?
I really like the fact
Okay.
that they would train their young people to be soldiers and send them home with an AR. I like that. I like that idea. We'd have our own militia. You know what? We have all manner of things going on here that we can change. A constitutional republic is also an option, which is different than what we have. So you know what? We've already got a constitution built. We would have a constitutional conference right away after the election or after the results, and the people of Alberta would decide what they want to do. I think that would be the best way, and have an election within 6 months to change the government completely.
What about sort of building in accountability provisions? I know you talked about this, or maybe it was Dennis talked about this. That these titles, the honourable and right honourable, actually go back to a time in British parliamentary history when if the sort of integrity of a legislative representative were impugned in any way, they would have to temporarily resign while there was an investigation that would clear them. Otherwise, they'd have to resign. Do you have some ideas, for example, recall or things of that nature, or is that looking too far ahead into the future at this point?
Well, I think it's looking a little bit far ahead into the future for us to get down to those kind of details, but
Okay.
those are definitely the things that we're talking about. Absolutely. The number one focus for me as CEO of APP right now is to win the referendum.
Yeah.
That's the number one focus.
Yeah.
Once we win the referendum, Dennis and lots of people are working on the details around that. But for me, unless we win the referendum, everything else is off the table. So
Yeah.
my big focus is on winning the referendum.
Yeah. Dennis, you were going to say something. Go ahead.
Well, no, I agree with what Mitch has just said, and one of the beauties of democracy is we can if you do it properly, you can have sensible discussions and come to conclusions. What we've created with respect to accountability is a proposed interim constitution
Right.
for Alberta, and it's based on the U.S. Constitution, i.e., implementing a constitutional republic. But
You,
it has
you also
more.
looked at examples from Texas and Idaho too, as well, right?
Exactly. And this document has levels of accountability that are superior to what the U.S. Constitution
Really?
had originally envisioned. And so one of the beauties of studying the U.S. Constitution is that you learn from the mistakes that were made. And hopefully what we've proposed as an interim constitution is transitional to a full constitutional conference in which a final constitution can result and be ratified, by the public. And whether it's the Swiss model that Mitch has suggested, or it's this constitutional republic that we will be releasing in a couple of weeks. And who knows what the outcome is, but it does have more accountability, and one of the levels of accountability occurs as a result of less governance. So there's less departments, less governance,
Right.
less to check, but then quarterly audits as well of the spending released to
So
the public.
basically, the exact opposite of the Mark Carney brand of liberalism.
Well, it's pretty much exactly the opposite of that. But I think it'll be very interesting. And Bruce, I'm going to be really interested to see what your comments are on this document, which we're going to be releasing soon. And right on the front cover, it's open for public discussion. So that really means it's open for change, because none of us have, despite the fact that there's a lot of bright minds that have gone into this document, none of us have all the answers on things, and healthy debate gets us to the right answer. And so that's why we're releasing it, just like we're releasing the document
Well,
tomorrow.
I'm going to invite you to send it to Bruce and Mitch.
Yep.
Have you seen Bruce's declaration?
No, I have not.
It's quite a compelling document. So I'd
I'll look for it.
invite Bruce to maybe share it with you, gentlemen, and then Dennis, maybe share those constitutional documents with Bruce. You couldn't find a better person in Canada to look at it. I can guarantee you.
Bruce, I just need your contact information. To get it to
I'd
you.
be delighted. Thank you, Dennis. I'd love to
Yeah.
have a look at it.
Sure.
And I'm actually working on my own version, so I'll send that to you too.
Oh, wonderful. This is incredible. Great stuff. I want to ask though, maybe Mitch or Dennis to comment on this, because this is a question that a lot of people ask. Maybe people in Ontario, where Bruce lives, are asking this. Why do Albertans think that their situation is different? I know there's the economics. That speaks for itself. The numbers are there, as Bruce said and Mitch said. But there's something else about the Alberta character. At least this is what you and Mitch are saying when you go out and speak to people. And you're right there in the grassroots, shaking hands, microphone, coffee and donuts. This is real grassroots politics, folks. Firsthand. I've seen it. What is different about Alberta that is driving this movement in your view, gentlemen? Mitch or Dennis, either of you want to
I'll
comment on
start.
that?
Dennis, you can chime in after. So early in the 1900s, Alberta was basically a desolate place. So what they did is they brought a bunch of Eastern European settlers here and basically turned them loose, and they had to make things work all on their own because there's no safety nets. That's two or three generations away now. I'm the third generation away from that, and my kids will be the fourth. But what we're seeing now is that attitude has stayed here. It was basically burn the boats. There's no way back. So we've got to break the land by hand. We've got to live in the house that we can build ourselves in this great place. And my grandfather tells stories of sending oats to market and owing a bill because the freight was more than the oats were worth. But in those days, they survived. They did what they had to do to survive, and I think that's it right there. That we here have the attitude that we want less government. We don't need them looking after us. We're going to do our own thing. We're capable. We're capable. We're educated. We have all the resources in the world that anybody would need. I think arguably Alberta's the richest place in the world. We can make this work very easily, and much to the benefit of all Albertans and even the rest of Canada, basically. Because if our economy starts to thrive, I'm sure Canadians will move here in large numbers, and they'll be welcome. So that's the other thing. But you know what? People here are entrepreneurial. People here are business people. People here can do things on their own. They have a can-do spirit. Absolutely no doubt about it.
And there's the type of anti-Americanism that we saw during the most recent federal election campaign, which I think is still strong in Ontario, Bruce. This sort of United Empire loyalism doesn't seem to be part of the Alberta character, does it, Dennis? That anti-Americanism is not a strong sentiment out west, is it?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Right now, yeah, no, I don't think it's as strong here as it is elsewhere. But I'd just like to add to what Mitch said, there are real cultural differences between the West and the East, particularly Alberta, Saskatchewan, Central, and Northern BC. And Mitch touched on it, but we don't like being overregulated, overgoverned, and overtaxed. And we don't accept the whole concept of DEI and ESG and the sort of things that have been rammed down our throats. But if I were to succinctly describe, what the difference is that all we need to do is look at Brexit. If you look at the main reason why Brexit occurred, you can look at all of the various reasons that were stated. But in truth, the UK didn't want to be dominated by the European Union.
Right.
They wanted to have a degree of self-determination, uncontrolled by Brussels. And like I say, if you do an analysis of why did Brexit occur and what are the reasons, that was the number one reason. They did not want to be controlled. Well, Alberta does not want to be controlled, and I think Saskatchewan as well, by the federal government. We long for self-determination and to get out from under the oppression that we feel as though we're experiencing. It's not just the money, it's more than that.
Right. And that's something that maybe people outside of Alberta, or even people within Alberta who don't support independence, don't realize that part of it. There seems to be maybe a hyper emphasis on the economic part of the argument, and some of the responses, well, suck it up, Buttercup. Be a good Canadian, be a loyal Canadian, do your part. Bruce, I want to turn to you again and talk a little bit about this government in Ottawa, Mark Carney. And we're seeing some bills like C5 and C6, which are really seem to me to be a progression from what Justin Trudeau's government was doing, and really getting deep into controlling what municipalities are doing. Very clear encroachment on quote unquote provincial powers constitutionally. What do you think, casting your mind forward and seeing how they're trying to bring us closer to the European Union and further away from the United States? I know that you don't have a crystal ball here, but how do you see this unfolding? Is this a disastrous direction that they're taking us in? And do you think that he's going to be able to do it? Or are we so closely tied to the U.S. that really Canada's not going to have any choice but to stay very close to America geopolitically? What's your take on that?
Well, on the one hand, there are legislative bills, C2, C5, that are taking us further down the road that we've already started down. Restricting the use of cash, providing for the ability to demand your information from internet providers, the power grab in C5 to be able to exempt certain projects and companies from the laws. It is another assault on the rule of law and on personal privacy and rights. On the other hand, this is just another government, and the problem is not a particular government, and it's not a particular person.
Right.
The problem is the nature of the society that has grown up. And yes, the bills are terrible, the policy is bad, but to Dennis's point, number one, it's not just about money. It's not about particular policies. It is about the nature of the society, and that is not going to change. If you go cap in hand to Ottawa, and you demand, as Danielle Smith has done, here are 9 policy demands, emissions cap and tanker ban and single-use plastic, and we'd like a pipeline, please. The worst thing, for my money, that could happen is that those policy demands would be met. Now,
Right.
that's not likely to happen, but imagine that they were. Right? You're still stuck with all the bad legislation and the ways in which the managerial state directs people's lives, like Dennis was describing. All the DEI stuff, all the woke stuff, all the privacy infringements, all of that remains. And if those policy demands are met, then the air goes out of the tires of the independence movement.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
it's not about the money. Dennis is right. It is not about the money. Now, revolutions often begin about money, no taxation
Sure.
without representation.
Sure. Boston Tea
But-
Party.
But it's not about the money. It is about the
Right.
nature of the society that you live in.
Mm-hmm.
And my hope is, as Mitch has alluded to, I hope that the culture of Albertans is in fact sufficiently different that they will be the ones who will say that the status quo will not do. Because you'll never get the majority of people in Ontario to say that.
Right.
And that's why the focus is on Alberta, because it is only in Alberta where it's possible that a critical mass of people will simply say the status quo will not do. We will not put up with the status quo anymore. And by the status quo, we mean all kinds of things that you're alluding to. The bad legislation, the bad, policy, but not just that. We're talking about a constitutional order of things
Right.
that has to be changed. And I agree with Dennis that the way out of this constitutionally is to take the best, which includes the American Constitution, and then you start with all the good things that they did, and then you fix it, because it has some problems as well.
Yeah.
You fix it, but you do away with the Canadian Constitution, with the Canadian way of governing, with the Canadian managerial state, with the Canadian ideology, with the Canadian deference to authority. Canada is a country built upon deference to authority.
Right.
And more than anything else, the Albertans, I hope, will say, not for us. That will not do.
And if they follow through, ultimately, that might also benefit people in other parts of Canada, like Ontario, right?
Oh yeah, see, we are pinning our hopes on you, Albertans, because
No
only
pressure.
at the moment, no pressure, and you shouldn't do this because you have a duty to save the country. You should save yourselves. But in
Right.
saving yourselves, you are the best shot at saving the country, because you have the potential for causing a existential political earthquake in this country, because the thing doesn't work without you. And it is only in the face of such an earthquake that it is even possible that the rest of the country will have a hard look at what its problems are. Maybe not even then, but it also could create a cascade or a domino effect. Other parts of the country might think, that's a good idea. We're coming to, or as the case may be. Who knows exactly?
Yeah. Yeah.
But this country needs disruption, political disruption, and Alberta is the best bet right now to produce it.
Well, what a great point that is. And it brings me to my next question. This is kind of the $64,000 question. And this is for Mitch and Dennis. What do you suppose Danielle Smith is going to do with a referendum result which comes out in favor of independence for Alberta? What will she do with that? What do you think, Mitch?
Well, she said that it's her job not to let the question even be asked. So I'm concerned. I'm not going to lie to you, but she said she would honor the results of the referendum question. So if that's the case, then we would hold her to it. Perhaps we should have a meeting soon, her and I, and discuss that very thing. It would possibly be good to know. I probably wouldn't get the answer I want, but you know what? It might be worth a shot to understand what's going on. What's happening from the grassroots perspective, and I believe I can speak to that, is I really believe that people don't want to, shuffle the leadership of the UCP after shuffling the leadership of the UCP once already.
Right.
They're actually hoping that the premier is going to be representative of their wishes, which is the reason they put her there. So I would suggest that since there's 38 out of 46 rural ridings in Alberta that have voted and elected the UCP government, that the UCP government should possibly be careful with the results of a referendum should they go that way, based on the fact that we believe there's up to 70 to 80% support in rural Alberta for independence. We're seeing that day to day in conversation with people as well. The urban ridings are not going to be as much in favor of it, but we're seeing 35 to 40% polls in Edmonton, and even bigger polls in Calgary. So this is a real possibility,
Remarkable.
actually, to tell you the truth. And I really believe that, from our comments before we started, I think our biggest problem is just to get this in front of people. Once they understand everything that's going on, I believe that they will be amenable to independence.
Mitch, I was at a recent fundraiser for the premier in Bonnyville. I know you were in attendance, and Mitch put out the question to the audience about, do you want to live in a free and independent, prosperous Alberta? And everybody, there's a big cheer came out. And then Danielle Smith, who was on stage, said, well, how many of you are in favor of, a better situation for Alberta within Canada? And there was sort of grumbling and wailing and gnashing of teeth. And she said, well, but I'm going to keep working on that anyway, And from that I took, oh, here we go. This is what Bruce calls the managerial state. I won an election, so I know what's good for you more than you know what's good for you. And so I'm going to keep working on what I think is good for you instead of listening to what you really want. Which brings me to my question for you, Dennis. Looking at what Danielle Smith has done with this panel that she's going to go around the province with, do you see Danielle Smith and her government as being an impediment to the independence movement that you and Mitch and others are bringing forward, or do you think that she's going to get in line with, she's going to start marching in the parade if she sees that enough people join it? What do you think?
Well, presently she's acting as an impediment. Whether she can get on the independence train or not, I don't really know. But this panel that she is convening, I think is fundamentally a waste of time. And I don't think it's going to inform her of anything different than what she already knows. But I want to just touch on where are we really at with respect to polling. The polling may be accurate, and that maybe 30 to up to as high as 47% in one poll indicated that Albertans were in favor of sovereignty. But is that accurate? And we live, Bruce, as you know, still in this era of cancel culture. And oftentimes people don't want to respond accurately to the question. Many of those individuals might have had their accounts frozen during the trucker convoy. But one piece of evidence that would suggest that cancel culture is alive and well is the last U.S. federal election, which didn't predict the outcome that occurred. And even the exit polling, people didn't want to respond to how they voted, notwithstanding how they were feeling before the election took place in the first instance. And then I was thinking about an idea in relation to the 2021 referendum to end equalization, where 62% of Albertans voted to end equalization. And I wondered, was that a proxy in terms of how Albertans really feel about not just ending equalization, but would they go to any length to ending equalization, including voting in favor of Alberta sovereignty? I don't know the answer to that question, but it's kind of an interesting intellectual question to ponder. Mm-hmm. So now let me get to the point of what I was saying, is that at present, I don't think she's on the independence train. what would get her on the independence train is if she knew, for example, that the Alberta Prosperity Project didn't just have 250,000 registrants in support of sovereignty, but had 1 million or more registrants.
Right.
That would be very persuasive. And we'll see what happens on this. But I can't predict what Danielle Smith will do, because it brings up the question: can you ever predict what anybody will
Right.
actually do, especially ladies?
We know, Bruce, that during the last Quebec referendum back in 1995, because of the sponsorship scandal, we know that the federal government was very involved in trying to prevent the success of that referendum. Do you suspect that as this campaign continues, if it gathers momentum, that type of propaganda campaign is going to happen again? That we're going to see NGOs and things of that nature, spreading anti-independence propaganda. Do you foresee that happening?
Oh, I would imagine. Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, if this becomes an actual threat, then you should expect your opponents to pull out all the steps to do whatever it needs to do
Yeah.
to defeat it, because you are threatening the viability of Confederation.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so here's one of the respects in which I hope Albertans are not too Canadian. Right? Like, I hope they do not get into this expecting reasonable behavior, rational behavior, good faith behavior, expecting the best of people, because that's not the way the federal government probably will respond.
Yeah.
Right? We talked
Yeah.
about Dennis and Mitch referred to accountability mechanisms in a new constitution. Well, the problem with accountability as a concept is that it assumes, well, maybe not all forms of it, but the idea that people should be called out for when they break the rules.
Right.
Problem is that a lot of the rules don't need to be broken. The whole mechanism, the whole machine, is based upon legal actions of government officials. That they are made into legal actions. They are not illegal. We saw this during COVID. A lot of
Yes.
stupid things, and worse,
Yeah.
were challenged during COVID, and we discovered that they were totally legal.
Yeah.
And so you don't have any accountability for legal actions, right? So
Yeah.
there's nothing illegal about the federal government doing all that it can do to prevent a successful referendum in Alberta, and then to to win the negotiations if it happens to pass, right? So please, Albertans, don't be naive. Don't be Canadian naive about this. You're heading into a political revolution. Be prepared. This is unknown, dangerous territory, but it's something that you have to do. It's something you have to do for your own sake. You know the existing situation will not do. And the only way to get out of it is to head down this path and to take what comes.
Well, what a great way to round out the conversation, folks. We've been here for over an hour with our good friends Bruce Pardy, Mitch Sylvester, and Dennis Modry. I hope that you've really engaged in this conversation. If you like what you heard here, or if it bothered you, share it widely. You can find more information about Alberta independence by visiting the Alberta Prosperity Project website. If you're in the Calgary area, these two gentlemen, Mitch and Dennis, are going to be there tomorrow speaking on this topic in great detail. I think attending one of these meetings really is a really extraordinary experience. It's unlike anything else that I've ever been to. And I've spoken at these meetings and also attended as an audience participant. And they really are well worth attending. You'll learn so much, and you'll meet many other people like yourselves who want to learn more and are interested in what's going on in our country. You also need to check out Bruce Pardy's Rights Pro website and also his X page, where he posts widely. Really a brilliant legal mind, and we're very grateful to have him here. Gentlemen, I want to thank you all so much for participating in this conversation. It's going to be very exciting to see where this all leads. And you know what? I'd love to have you all back in 3 or 6 months just to sort of touch base and see how things have gone. Hopefully, Bruce is right that the thing only gathers momentum and really affects the type of change, political change and cultural change that is so necessary in a country. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us tonight. I want to end off with just a short prayer. This is from Psalm chapter 55, verses 16 and 18, which reads, "As for me, I will call upon God, and the Lord shall save me. Evening and morning and at noon will I pray and cry aloud, and he shall hear my voice. He hath delivered my soul in peace from the battle that was against me, for there were many with me." So I want to thank all of you for joining us. Gentlemen, again, thanks again for your time and for your brilliant commentary. Thanks again for being with us, and for all of you for joining us on this Grey Matter live stream.
Thanks, Leighton.